Welcome back to High Stakes. Elevate your betting game by hitting that subscribe button and never miss out on our daily content. Want exclusive access to premium betting picks? Join our Patreon. Links waiting for you in the comment section below. Stay ahead of the game with High Stakes. Alabama versus Vanderbilt. Get ready for a matchup where the stakes are high, but the spread might just be too steep to back. Alabama is coming off a bruising all-out battle against Georgia and now faces Vanderbilt in what could be considered a breather before two massive showdowns with South Carolina and number 4 Tennessee on the horizon. At 24-point road favorites, the Tide might not have the motivation to crush the Commodores as they gear up for tougher tests ahead. We've seen this scenario before when Alabama failed to cover as 30.5-point favorites against USF earlier this season, so history could be repeating itself here. Vanderbilt, though underdogs, has proven they can put points on the board, scoring 27 at Missouri and 34 against Virginia Tech. Their offense is no slouch, and with dual RBs Jam Miller and Justice Haynes leading Alabama's ground game to control the clock, Vandy could easily sneak enough points on the board to spoil Alabama's cover. Alabama's approach could be more about grinding out the win and escaping with a W rather than a blowout. Take the 24 points with Vandy. This game is closer than it looks on paper. As for the total, don't be fooled by Vanderbilt's 4-0 record on the over this season. Yes, they've been lighting up the scoreboard, but facing a defense like Alabama's, one that's only giving up 15 points per game, and a remarkable 8 points if you exclude the Georgia clash, is a whole different ballgame. Plus, both teams have been playing mistake-free football with minimal turnovers, leading to long, clock-eating drives. This spells out a game with fewer possessions and, ultimately, fewer points. Vandy's red zone struggles will likely continue against Alabama's stellar defense, and while the Commodores' place kicker has been decent, missing 3 of 10 attempts could become a factor. Don't be surprised if a missed deep field goal or 2 keeps this score under the total. Go against the trend and take the under 55.5 points. This game is set to be a low-scoring chess match, as Alabama looks to move on quickly to their bigger battles ahead. Indiana versus Northwestern. Indiana is about to take center stage once again, and after their dominant road performance against UCLA, where they crushed the Bruins 42-13 as 3.5-point favorites, there's no reason to believe they won't bring that same energy to a much less intimidating atmosphere at Northwestern's temporary stadium. The Wildcats, they're going to try to stay in the game by leaning heavily on their run game and hoping star RB Cam Porter is healthy enough to carry the load. But here's the kicker. Indiana's rush defense has been outstanding, holding opponents to just 82 yards per game. If Northwestern plans to be one-dimensional, that spells big trouble. Indiana has been a covering machine this season, cashing in every game, and with a 35-point positive margin on the season, they're in prime position to keep that streak alive. 2 touchdowns? No problem. Indiana is locked and loaded to keep the spread in check, and the minus 13.5 points should feel like a layup. Pick Indiana minus 13.5 points. As for the total, don't let Northwestern's recent 24-5 snoozer against Washington fool you into expecting another defensive slog. Sure, the Wildcats have hit the under in 3 of their 4 games, but their offense was banged up in that Washington game, and they're bound to fare better at home. Earlier this season, they put up 20 points against a solid Duke defense, so they're capable of finding the end zone. But here's where the value lies. The odds makers had to adjust the total down after Northwestern's 5-point outing, creating a prime opportunity for this game to sneak over. Indiana's offense will do their part, and Northwestern should be able to chip in just enough to push this one past the posted 41-point total. This is a classic case of the books overreacting to one bad game. Don't fall for it. Pick over 41 points. Expect Indiana to handle business and the score to climb just enough to cash the over, with both teams doing their part. Buckle up, it's going to be a fun one. West Virginia versus Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State enters this game hungry for redemption after back-to-back tough losses to Utah and Kansas State. But this matchup against West Virginia presents the perfect opportunity to get back on track. The Mountaineers, fresh off a bye week, may have lost some momentum after their big win over Kansas. A week off can sometimes be a blessing, but in this case, it might have dulled the sharpness West Virginia had in that win. Let's not forget, West Virginia has struggled to cover the spread this year, sitting at just 1 to 3 ATS, and their offense has been middling at best. While their defense has kept them hanging around in games, it hasn't been enough to push them over the edge, except for that Kansas victory. On the flip side, Oklahoma State's offense is a juggernaut, boasting the 11th best passing attack in the country. And what's West Virginia's Achilles heel? A vulnerable secondary that's allowing over 250 passing yards per game, a statistic the Cowboys are poised to exploit. Expect Oklahoma State to come out firing on all cylinders, lighting up the scoreboard and keeping West Virginia's defense on its heels all game long. Prediction: Oklahoma State Cowboys -3 points. As for the total, it's hard to see this game being anything other than a high-scoring affair. Oklahoma State's offense is built to move the ball in chunks, averaging over 30 points per game this season. Their aerial attack will shred West Virginia's weak secondary, but make no mistake, the Cowboys' defense is no brick wall. Ranking 121st in passing yards allowed and 118th in rushing yards per game, Oklahoma State will give up points, especially against a Mountaineers offense that will find ways to keep up, even on the road. With both defenses giving up yards and points at a high rate, the over feels like a solid play here. Expect a shootout from the opening kick. Prediction: over 64.5 points. In short, bet on Oklahoma State to cover and the scoreboard to light up as both teams rack up the points in what should be an exciting, fast-paced game. Kansas versus Arizona State. 2024 hasn't been kind to Kansas, but don't let their record fool you. The Jayhawks have been competitive, battling in most of their games. Now they face an Arizona State team that, while surprisingly solid, hasn't exactly been tested by top-tier competition. With their wins coming against teams with a combined record of 4-10, ASU's resume isn't exactly shining. This sets up a prime opportunity to back Kansas at plus money, especially considering their ability to run the ball effectively against elite defenses. Yes, ASU ranks 13th against the run on paper, but let's not forget they gave up 133 rushing yards to Texas Tech in a game the Red Raiders controlled. Kansas is ready to flip the script here, handing ASU their second Big 12 loss in back-to-back games. This is where you take advantage of the generous 3-point cushion the odds makers are offering. Prediction: Kansas Jayhawks +3 points. On the point total, while Kansas has been involved in a couple of high-scoring shootouts lately, this game is shaping up differently. Both teams are likely to lean heavily on the ground game, which will chew up the clock and limit the overall scoring. Kansas, especially, will be looking to protect quarterback Jalen Daniels, who's been turnover-prone this season with 8 interceptions against only 5 touchdowns. On the other side, ASU is run first, ranking 9th in the nation with 44.5 rushing attempts per game, which is why they sit at 32nd with 195 rushing yards per game. The low total set by the books is a strong indication of how this game is expected to play out: gritty, run-heavy, and methodical. ASU's recent games have seen totals a full 8 points higher, and yet the under has hit in 2 of their last 3 matchups. With both teams focusing on ball control and minimizing mistakes, the under becomes the smart play here. Kansas needs to get in, secure the win, and head into their bye week to regroup. This matchup won't be about lighting up the scoreboard, it'll be about grinding out a result. Prediction: under 50.5 points. Expect Kansas to capitalize on this perfect opportunity, while both teams keep the game on the ground, turning this into a slower, more deliberate affair. Bet on the Jayhawks and the under for a winning combination. Miami, Florida versus California. The buzz in Berkeley is about to hit a fever pitch, and it's all thanks to the magic of college game day. When game day comes to town, it's more than just a spectacle. It's a surge of adrenaline that electrifies the stadium, energizes the players, and amps up the home crowd to a whole new level. Memorial Stadium will be rocking, and Cal's players will be feeding off that energy. When you're playing in front of a fired-up home crowd with national attention on the line, it's hard not to rise to the occasion. This surge of intensity gives Cal a fighting chance against a tough Miami squad, and don't overlook the travel factor. The Hurricanes are making the long trip from the East Coast to the West, and that cross-country trek can take a toll. Jet lag and adjusting to a night game in a different time zone often leads to slow starts for traveling teams, and Miami is no exception. Teams that cross multiple time zones for primetime matchups have a history of struggling out of the gate. Miami's high-octane offense is potent, sure, but don't be surprised if it takes them a quarter or two to shake off the travel cobwebs and hit their stride. That's where Cal can capitalize. If they can keep things clean, avoid the costly pre-snap penalties, and give quarterback Fernando Mendoza enough time in the pocket, there's a real opportunity here. Mendoza may not be flashy, but if Cal's offensive line holds up, he can manage the game efficiently enough to keep them in it. Combine that with the raw energy of a home game day crowd, and this could easily be a much closer contest than many expect. Prediction: California Golden Bears plus 10.5 points. Now, let's look at the total. With Miami traveling across the country and likely starting slower than usual, Cal's defense has a window to make some early stops. Miami's offense ranks second nationally in scoring, but that explosive playmaking might not appear right away. Cal's defense, while not a shutdown unit, could disrupt Miami's rhythm enough to keep the game close in the first half. Meanwhile, Cal's offensive struggles are no secret. The Golden Bears have had trouble protecting Mendoza all season, and with Miami averaging 3.6 sacks per game, the pressure will be relentless. Miami's defensive front, led by the return of Ruben Bain Jr., will likely bottle up Cal's offense, forcing stalled drives and possible turnovers. With both teams dealing with their own offensive limitations, whether it's Miami shaking off a slow start or Cal's offensive line struggling, the game's script sets up perfectly for a lower-scoring affair. As Miami finds its groove in the second half, expect more ball control and fewer big plays. Both teams will aim to avoid mistakes, keeping the clock running and the score lower than the books are projecting. Prediction: under 54.5 points. With Cal rallying behind their crowd and a sluggish start likely from Miami, this matchup has all the makings of a gritty, close contest. Back the Golden Bears to cover and bet the under in what could turn into a defensive battle.